Picture a tranquil French lakeside resort, Evian. I mean, it's absolutely beautiful, right? But inside the summit rooms there recently, the atmosphere was, well, let's just say it was anything but calm. A highly dramatic gathering just pulled back the curtain and revealed the raw, unfiltered geopolitical power of artificial intelligence. Welcome to today's Explainer. We are unpacking a completely unprecedented incident, one that literally flipped the global digital order on its head and forced nations to wake up to a pretty terrifying reality about the tech they rely on every single day.
Okay, let's dive into exactly how this is going to break down. First, we'll look at the global AI kill switch. Next, the summit in Evian. Then we'll cover Europe's 6 demands, and finally wrap up with the sovereign reality. All right, part 1, the global AI kill switch. Let's get right into the inciting incident. Talk about giving you whiplash. Check out this timeline. So on June 3rd, the European Union unveils this massive tech package. Cool, right? But then just 9 days later, bam, June 12th, the U.S. Commerce Department suddenly issues a directive ordering the AI company Anthropic to completely block its most capable frontier models, Fable 5 and Mythos 5, for any foreign national. Now, because you obviously can't reliably check someone's nationality in real time at API scale, Anthropic was left with literally one option: a worldwide shutdown. Just like that. European businesses and public institutions that had deeply integrated these models into their daily workflows lost access overnight. There was zero warning, absolutely no transition period. And then, a mere 5 days after that massive shockwave, world leaders are meeting on June 17th at the G7 summit. This whole series of events really forces us to look at a concept that's absolutely crucial right now: technological sovereignty. Basically, this is the ability to manage and govern your essential technologies completely internally, totally free from any crippling foreign reliance. You know, for years, this was kind of just an abstract political buzzword. People talked about it, but it didn't really bite. But the June 12th ban? That changed the game entirely. It suddenly took this abstract debate about digital dependency and turned it into an immediate, devastating operational crisis for Europe. Moving on to part 2, the summit in Evian. So it's June 17th, and host Emmanuel Macron gathers global leaders at this French lakeside resort. And sitting right there at the working lunch, essentially being treated like actual heads of state, were 3 guys: Dario Amodi of Anthropic, Dimas Hassabis of Google DeepMind, and Sam Altman of OpenAI. These are the 3 executives whose labs are literally building the most capable AI models on the planet. I mean, the symbolism here is just completely unprecedented. You've got these tech leaders sitting directly alongside towering political figures: President Trump, Chancellor Merz, Prime Minister Starmer, President Macron. They were, for all intents and purposes, the guests of honor. But we all know the unspoken guest in the room was that June 12th incident. Now, you might be wondering, what was the actual vibe in that room? Well, talk about a massive disconnect. The CEOs arrived with a very unified pitch. Amodei and Hassabis were pushing hard for a united Western coalition of democratic states, basically saying, hey, we'll offer structured access for trusted partners. Altman was arguing that no single lab should be making these big decisions anyway. But then you look at Europe's reality. The subtext of the CEO's pitch was honestly pretty jarring. I mean, think about it. Amodei is sitting there asking Europe to trust a US-led democratic coalition literally 5 days after Washington used his own company's products as a geopolitical lever to just shut off access. So Europe arrives with one very uncomfortable question: can we realistically rely on models that a foreign cabinet can just switch off by decree whenever they feel like it? Which leads us perfectly into part 3, Europe's 6 demands. Okay, so European leaders like Ursula von der Leyen and Friedrich Merz didn't just show up to complain. They brought 6 very specific demands to the table to counter this dependency. First up, reliable access. Von der Leyen made it clear it's a mutual interest for European citizens to safely use the best models. Second, they want an end to the kill switch risk. See, under the U.S. deemed export doctrine, Washington treats foreign server access like a physical export, meaning they effectively hold an off switch. Europe wants ironclad guarantees that this won't happen again. Third, they asked for a trusted partner scheme to guarantee access rights for non-U.S. entities. Fourth, real technological sovereignty through major localized AI investments. Fifth, they want an actual say in where the physical infrastructure, stuff like data centers, power, and chips, actually sits. Because, let's be real, these models devour budgets the size of small nations. And finally, number 6, child safety. Actually, I want to pause on that 6th demand for a second, because child safety is exactly where Europe fundamentally rubs against the U.S. regulatory approach. While the U.S. largely rejects the idea of blanket AI regulation, European leaders are actively pushing hard lines. Over in the UK, Keir Starmer announced a social media ban for anyone under 16. Meanwhile, France's Macron is pushing a really similar rule for under 15s before the end of the year. Brigitte Macron even led an entire forum dedicated to this issue. It just perfectly illustrates this deep philosophical divide between the two sides on how these technologies should actually be integrated into society.
But look, demands are just words unless you can back them up, right? To actually build this independence, Europe needed capital, and this number is absolutely staggering. 420 billion euros. That is the financial scale of the European Commission's technological sovereignty package. And remember, they actually unveiled this on June 3rd, right before the whole crisis even hit. It is a monumental, direct response to Europe's near-total reliance on US and Asian providers for cloud computing, semiconductors, and of course, AI.
So where does 420 billion euros actually go? The package is designed to fund massive local infrastructure, so Europe is never again left at the mercy of foreign decrees. It includes a Cloud and AI Development Act, which is huge because, for the first time, it writes sovereignty risk assessments right into public procurement. It also funds local AI gigafactories where European startups can actually train their models at home. And it focuses really heavily on supporting homegrown anchor labs, companies like France's Mistral or Germany's Black Forest Labs. The ultimate goal here? Build an ecosystem that simply cannot be switched off by someone sitting across the Atlantic. And finally, Part 4, the sovereign reality. So the summit wraps up, and while honestly, very little that is binding was actually decided, the direction is definitely set. The G7 pledged closer coordination on risks, and President Macron even announced a cooperation platform among Western democracies that's supposed to launch within a month. But here is the hard truth. The US block on Fable 5 and Mythos 5, it stayed in effect. Anthropic is still in negotiations with the U.S. administration, sure, but those export controls remain fully in force. As Canada's Prime Minister Mark Carney really neatly summed it up, the vital task right now is simply to build out and diversify. And here is the absolute kicker regarding those three CEOs at the summit. The crucial reality check is this. Reliability isn't in those three men's hands. What Europe desperately wants from Amadei, Hassabis, and Altman, they simply cannot deliver. They don't hold the kill switch. Washington does. No matter what structured access or, democratic coalitions the tech executives promise, the U.S. government has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that it can turn a U.S. product into a geopolitical lever overnight. So what is the game plan? Let's look at a realistic roadmap for Europe. Step 1, Europe just has to accept that full, true sovereignty is a short-term illusion. They are genuinely years behind on cloud infrastructure and chips. Step 2 is making sure they have pragmatic, diplomatic access to U.S. models in the meantime. Just survive the short term. But step 3, that's the ultimate destination. Building open-weight models where the core AI architecture is freely accessible and, crucially, hosting them on homegrown hardware. If you run open models on your own servers, your own chips, and powered by your own grid, that is the one and only true way to guarantee that no foreign cabinet can ever switch your systems off by decree. At that point, you're not relying on anyone else's goodwill. Which really leaves us with one final defining question. Can Europe stop having to ask? The ultimate lesson of the Evian Summit isn't about figuring out who the right person to ask for access is. True technological sovereignty means fundamentally transforming your infrastructure from the ground up so that you no longer have to ask for permission to participate in the future. Kind of gives you something to think about the next time you log into your favorite AI tool, doesn't it? Thanks for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you next time.